Hello, everyone. This is episode number 5 of my research series where I look at things that interest me. Today, we're going to be covering U.S. East Coast states and specifically the history behind them. We're going to be looking at Rhode Island and Connecticut, which resides right under Massachusetts and was part of the southern New England colonies. So diving right into it, start with Rhode Island history. I also have my notes in front of me, so I can remember some of the specific names that I don't know by heart. But starting off in 1636, the colony of Rhode Island wasn't started for a while because first we had Robert Williams being banished from Massachusetts along with a few other religious leaders for their specific views and, arguments and statements about religion with the Puritans, who they didn't always agree fully with. And the Puritans were a very strict religious group of individuals. And so Robert Williams then decided to go south. He decided to move to a place that he called the Province of Plantations and declared it as religiously free. As an individual, Robert Williams first was, he changed multiple religions. He became a Puritan, but then the dispute happened and he became... he became the first Baptist. He became the first Baptist form of Christianity in America and the New World. But he later gave up all religion or all churches and remained in the Christian faith, but he never technically associated with one religion. Then in 1638, you also had Anne Hutchinson, John Clark, and other individual leaders who were also removed from the Puritan-led Massachusetts, and they joined Roger Williams and founded a new settlement called Portsmouth, which is a large city now in Rhode Island, but there was still tension between some of these religious leaders over the founding of these colonies, and because of that, some of them split off and decided to found Newport, which is the southern part of Rhode Island and was probably one of the largest ports in Rhode Island. Just a quick note ahead, Rhode Island is one of the smallest states, or is the smallest state in the United States of America, and it only encompasses around 1,500 square meters, or square miles, not square meters. That would be pretty small. Moving forward, Samuel Gordon also purchased land from the Native Americans in 1644, and this precipitated an argument with Massachusetts Bay Colony, fighting over, land designation, being able to purchase land there. But Samuel Gordon eventually got a royal charter from the king, and then eventually, again, there was another royal charter put out, but for all three of not only Samuel Gordon's land, but also Portsmouth and Newport, which then banded together and formed Rhode Island colony. And this was an important moment because this was one of the first colonies that was focusing on having religious freedom and not being either a religiously focused colony or being a plantation and farming focused colony. And so this grantor was provided by the King Charles II, and then people would often call Rhode Island the sewer of the colonies because a lot of the people who were banished from Massachusetts would be accepted in Rhode Island, and that was mostly due to the fact that they had this religious freedom where people could practice whatever religion they wanted. They could practice whatever religion they wanted unless it was Catholic. That was the one note. Then in 1686, Rhode Island was forced to join the Dominion of New England, like all the New England colonies were. And this was led by Sir Edmund Andros, who we talked about in the Massachusetts Bay research video, or Massachusetts Bay Colony research video. Basically, this guy was very hated, very disliked. He didn't allow for any national assembly or assembly of local leadership, so it was basically just up to his rule, and he was also trying to fight local land titles from the colonists, which was their center for independence and liberty and basically everything about their livelihoods. Um, yeah, and then until he was disposed and the Dominion was canceled, no real interesting information happened. So if we fast forward to 1776, Rhode Island was the first colony to declare independence against Britain. Um, then looking within the war, so British forces controlled most of the Narragansett Bay. Um, Going back a little bit earlier, I skipped over this, but Narragansett tribe was a Native American tribe who were fighting and contesting for the lands of Rhode Island. Sorry, I take that back. They were not fighting for it. Roger Williams actually made a deal with them to be able to settle in their lands, and they were peaceful tribes. And the Narragansett Bay is still to this day a very prominent bay for trade and shipping. And this was at the time of the American Revolutionary War, controlled by the British until they were repelled in the attack of 1780 for the Battle of Newport. And so these British forces were repelled to New York, where the French then took over settlement of this Newport position. And because of their behavior within the war, being so excellent and outstanding, according to the people of Rhode Island, as well as their commitment to fighting against the British and joining the Continental Army, the the colony of Rhode Island allowed for the practice of Catholic faith within Rhode Island, which was before not allowed. And this was purely because the French were so well behaved during the war. After the American Revolutionary War, funny enough, Rhode Island was was the only state to not sign the Declaration of Independence, and eventually became the last state to sign the Declaration of Independence, only because they were forced to, as they were threatened with increases in levies and taxes, or an increase in the levy and tax is the same thing, and they were threatened to have their taxes increased as a foreign nation if they did not sign the or if they did not sign their constitution. I think I said Declaration of Independence. They were the last colony to sign the Constitution to make themselves a state, and so they were basically forced to do that. And that's because there was a lot of anti-federalist movements, and as a populace, they seemed to be, I guess, very independently focused. Maybe because they had been banished and pushed away by so many people, they just wanted to have their own states. There was also almost a civil war in Rhode Island in 1788, when anti-federalist politician and ex-army general led 1,000 troops into Providence, which is the capital of Rhode Island, because there were such large 4th of July celebrations that it was really just angering these anti-federalists and joining the United States. Interesting facts about Rhode Island. Population is 1.1 million individuals. Providence is the capital, and Rhode Island is also the smallest state in the United States of America. Moving on to Connecticut. So the first European settlement there was in 1614 by Adrian Block. So he was the first person to sail around and up the Connecticut River. And he was a Dutch fur trader, I think, or Dutch merchant, and claimed the land for the Dutch, who were settling there, but were not permanently there because of the constant ongoing battles with the Pequot Native Americans, who were a very strong, very militant Native American tribe, and who were constantly warring with not only the Dutch settlers but the American settlers, and eventually led to the large Pequot War, where the Pequots lost and were kind of forced to kind of lick their wounds and try to recover, as they had huge amounts of casualties and weren't really able to attack the settlers anymore. So this was a highly contested area. And in 1623, the Dutch East India Company made this a major trading route for them for fur trade. And that only lasted, though, until around 1650, when the It wasn't the Native Americans that were no longer contesting the Dutch, but it started to become the well, it was then the English settlers who started to push further west, and they were telling them, "Hey, you gotta get out of our land. Like, we're gonna claim this soon." And so then, with the, I think the compromise of, I think, the Treaty of Hartford. That's what it was called. So, and then in 1650, they had or signed the Treaty of Hartford, which then was the Dutch agreeing to leave Connecticut for good. And by 1654, all Dutch were gone from the colony, or the soon-to-be colony. Now, most of the settlers who founded land and settlements in today's Connecticut were people who used to live in the Plymouth colony or who lived in Massachusetts Bay Colony, and either planned before even coming to Massachusetts to find their own land for settlement, or were, I guess, kicked out and wanted to start their own settlements. And so some of these places that were first started, the first like smaller colonies, were in Windsor, or the first settlements were Windsor, Wethersfield, and Hartford, which is today's capital. Also, Springfield, Massachusetts used to belong to Connecticut, but then when they were redrawing the border lines, it became part of Massachusetts, and it's now one of Massachusetts' largest cities. Now, something that's really important about Connecticut is that they were, at the time, based off of all of the warring that was going on in Connecticut, the three main settlements, Windsor, Wethersfield, and Hartford, came together with their main free men and ratified something called the Fundamental Order of Connecticut, which is often cited and talked about as the first ever form of a modern constitution in America, and has laid the groundworks, and lineally is the most impactful and significant piece of work for the current, or for the American Constitution that was later signed by the 13 colonies. So Connecticut was super impactful for its for this Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, which was also like the first form of democracy experienced by any colony and by any state in America, or by any settlement in America, which is very important. An important figure in that time was also Thomas Hooker. And funny enough, I know one of my best friends is a hooker, so he's related to Thomas Hooker, which is kind of crazy. In 1622, I think that date's wrong. Wait one sec. No, it's right. Oh, sorry, 1662. So not 1622, but 1662. The colony of Connecticut received its first, or its royal charter from the king, which made it an official colony, and also allowed it to kind of ratify its self-governance. So it allowed it to ratify these fundamental orders, which they could then really set in stone, and is again what laid the groundworks for the common constitution founded or written after and during the American Revolution. Other than that, land disputes with New York, where that was another kind of highly contested topic. Connecticut had a few land disputes, one with Pennsylvania, but more importantly, one with New York, because they border a lot of similar areas. New York technically had a claim to all of the land west of the Connecticut River, and all the way up to the Delaware Bay. And because of that, they settled the agreement by saying that Connecticut could take control of that part of the land, but that Long Island would then belong to New York, and that settled the land agreement, or the land dispute. So that was also something interesting about Connecticut. While there was a huge presence of Connecticut soldiers in the American Revolutionary War, they never really had any major battles fought in Connecticut, so there's not a lot of important stuff there. Um, yeah, and the last interesting thing was the capital of Connecticut is Hartford, right along the Connecticut River. So that is all of the interesting stuff for today, covering both Rhode Island and Connecticut. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.